What is the biggest amount of wealth one could accumulate over his lifespan? If your guess is anywhere below $100 trillion, you're in for a surprise. Today we will discuss the wealthiest people who ever lived. And while most of them are long gone, centuries later, we can still see the ultra-luxurious life they were leading, even by today's standards. William the Conqueror. The royal family of England is often regarded as one of the wealthiest families in the world. With their $88 billion, they are definitely not going to sleep under a bridge anytime soon. But their immense wealth pales compared to their ancestor, the first king of England. William the Conqueror not only managed to take power on the British island when he was 38, but also accumulated a vast fortune, which today would equal $228 billion. Around 1/3 of them were only from taxes, which he collected from peasants in Normandy. So they were either very rich peasants or were extremely heavily taxed into impoverishment. I'll let you guess which is more likely. The rest of his riches, naturally, came from the conquered British territory. Local barons who wanted to keep their land and heads had to swear an oath to the new king and pay huge taxes, which William decided were way too small to share. So with $228 billion, he decided to finally live a little. He spent the vast majority on building infrastructure. Before his death, he had erected over 100 structures like castles, fortresses, churches, and the iconic White Tower. They were decorated with intricate tapestries. Gold was definitely his favorite color, and at the time, it was easier to just make everything gold than paint it. So in William's domain, there were seas of gold and silver. Osman Ali Khan. Being the wealthiest Indian who ever lived should say a lot. Today, there are people in the Asian country who live in 27-story houses, yet they can't even come close to Osman Ali Khan, the last ruler of Hyderabad. Ali Khan was head of the princely state from 1911 until India annexed the country in 1948. When your ruler is known as the wealthiest man on earth, despite sharing one era with J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Rothschild, and other well-known tycoons, it's really a miracle the country remained independent for that long, especially when it had the only running diamond mine in the world at the time. Being in charge of a mint of a country that was the sole supplier of the global diamond trade, accumulating $230 billion is the bare minimum one could achieve. Well, the Nizam could have earned more if he hadn't reinvested the profits in making life better for his citizens. Despite introducing electricity, railways, roads, and an airport to his country, the ruler managed to acquire some lavish things for himself, like $100 million worth of gold and silver, over $500 million in jewels, and one of the biggest diamonds in the world, the Jacob diamond, worth approximately $50 million. To show off his wealth, the Nizam gifted Queen Elizabeth II diamond jewels, a tiara, and a necklace for her marriage. This shows that Ali Khan wasn't just the wealthiest man in the world, but had the biggest balls as well, showing off his wealth to the person who oppressed his country just several decades earlier. Nicholas Romanov. Not everyone can boast that they brought communism into the world. Not that anyone in their right mind would, but still. Nicholas Romanov, also known as the last Russian emperor, ruled so incompetently that he managed to make Russia the breeding ground for the ideology that to this day haunts the world. One would guess that such a man can't be that rich. But unlike with Russia, when it comes to his wealth, Nicholas did pretty well. With $300 billion in his bank account, while his subjects literally ate grass and dirt, one could easily spot some minor social injustices. One would be forgiven to wonder, how could this Tsar get such vast wealth when his citizens were so poor? The answer lies with America. More accurately, Alaska. Romanov was the one who sold the oil-rich peninsula to the USA in fear of losing it to the British. Of course, when he sold it, he had no idea how rich in resources the land was, but, well, It's not as if he lost his head over... oh wait, never mind. Of course, the Tsar and his family lived in supreme luxury that could even be the envy of today's billionaires. One can only witness the opulence they lived in when seeing the magnificent palaces in St. Petersburg and Moscow. One of these palaces is the Kremlin, where today another power-hungry maniac is residing. Whether his end would be the same, we will see. John D. Rockefeller. Being dubbed as the most productive man who ever lived is a testament to how John D. Rockefeller became the richest man on this planet in the middle of the 20th century. Over his entire life, Rockefeller is estimated to have earned over $1.5 trillion. By the end of his life, his net worth was estimated to be around $400 billion. And how could it be otherwise? With his Standard Oil, he controlled 90% of the US oil market for a few decades at the end of the 19th century and the start of the 20th. Unlike today's billionaires, Rockefeller knew how to spend his money, not just raise them. One of his first big purchases was his life. He paid not to be drafted into the American Civil War, which most probably saved his life. In his later year, he had the idea to pay British Prime Minister Winston Churchill to write his biography. Well, that didn't happen, but the idea was great regardless. But of course, one of John's biggest expenditures was to build all the family mansions, which today are nothing short of cultural landmarks. They are not only architectural masterpieces, but also are richly decorated with beautiful pieces of art from famous painters. Rockefeller was also one of the first billionaires who had a thing for cars. Back then, owning a car was nothing short of a statement, and John had one of the first automobiles ever produced. Unfortunately, he unintentionally set a standard where everyone who reaches 10 figures in their bank account has to have a garage of ultra-expensive cars. So it wasn't all good that Rockefeller left this world. Mansa Musa. Being rich and from Mali today sounds like the beginning of a very inappropriate joke, but back in the 14th century, the standards were a bit different. Back then, the resource-rich Mali hadn't been decimated by colonialism, and its emperor, Musa I, was considered the wealthiest man on the planet, with an estimated net worth of $415 billion. Adjusted to today's money, of course. When Mansa Musa came to power in 1312, Europe was one of the worst places to live. Famine, constant wars, and various plagues ravaged the land. The Black Death was on its way and soon would decimate the entire continent. That gave the opportunity for some African kingdoms to rise and flourish, and Mali was on top of the list. Once in power, Musa conquered the city of Timbuktu, which was the most important trade city in Africa at the moment, comparable to Constantinople. These conquests came with some lucrative perks, quickly making Musa the wealthiest man on earth. In 1324, he showed off his enormous wealth by traveling to Mecca with a caravan stretching as far as the eye could see. Not the one knowing how to travel on a budget, Musa was carrying tons of gold with several thousand camels and horses, had tens of thousands of people as entourage, and built mosques everywhere he stopped, just so he could pray to Allah properly. I guess he had some reason to be personally thankful to his God. Wherever Musa went, he left the economy in ruins due to his frivolous spending, which drove high inflation so fast that local economies couldn't keep up and simply collapsed. That's how you conquer a country in style. You make the locals so rich that the economy no longer can support them. The US can take a page out of Musa's book. King Solomon. Compared to this Jewish king, the previous entries could be considered ill-fortunate hobos. King Solomon is regarded in the Bible as the wealthiest ruler in the world. And we all know how trustworthy the Book of Books is. According to the Old Testament, King Solomon received around 25 tons of gold annually for 39 years straight. That's enough to build a palace from the golden bricks themselves, without having to give them to anyone. Something like Lego only just a tiny bit more expensive. Experts have estimated that over his rule, thanks to this tribute, taxation, and other income, Solomon's wealth would be equal to around $2.2 trillion in today's money. Naturally, due to the nature of the information source, we can't expect to see the king spending his money on booze, drugs, and women. Instead, the Bible insisted that all his spendings were strictly virtuous, and he even built the first Jewish temple in Jerusalem. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether the Bible's suggestion or mine is more believable. Augustus Caesar. Appointing yourself the first emperor of the world's biggest country may sound like something Vladimir Putin may do any moment now, but he won't be the first to have done such a thing. Augustus Caesar did the same around 2,000 years ago, and this move certainly worked in his favor. With this simple political move, Augustus gained riches, which, adjusted to today's money, would amount to $4.6 trillion. This almost unimaginable net worth sounds a bit far-fetched until you realize Augustus personally owned Egypt, which was responsible for feeding half of the empire. Yes, Caesar could have drunk his coffee inside a pyramid or on the Sphinx's head if he so wished. Along with owning an entire country, Augustus was estimated to have at least 10 million gold coins left by his uncle Julius. The 10 million gold coins are estimated to be equal to $200 billion in today's money. So, not too bad of a start in life considering. Much of this money was spent on infrastructure. Roads, monuments, and temples were built with Augustus's money as he infused his personal finances with that of the Roman Empire. In addition, several million were spent annually on public entertainment, as the emperor financed chariot races, gladiator fights, and other sports events. However, probably his most important possession was his personal army of 250,000 soldiers. They were instrumental in his plans to keep the country under his rule, so he paid them generously. This would have cost Augustus around $250 million annually in today's money. But what can I say? Staying in power, ruling the biggest country on Earth, and gaining $4.6 trillion is well worth this spare change. Akbar I. If you ask someone what the Mughals' empire is, they would probably think it's some new kind of virus that would force another lockdown on the entire world. Yes, the Far Eastern Empire that once ruled most of the Indian subcontinent and the lands south and west of the Himalayas hadn't had much impact on Western culture, but to South Asia, its influence was crucial. Its importance is mainly due to Akbar I, who at one time is said to have ruled over 25% of the world's GDP. Of course, this makes his immense wealth of $21 trillion a bit less impressive. But still, anyone can appreciate what an inconceivable amount of money that is. If I had $21 trillion, I'd surely live a secluded and humble life. Akbar, however, had a different idea. He lived a lavish and luxurious lifestyle even by today's standards. Akbar built himself 3 astounding palaces in Delhi, Agra, and Fatehpur Sikri, and decorated them lavishly with so much gold that Donald Trump would get an aneurysm just looking at it. The interior was also decorated with silk, marble, and a lot of artwork. Akbar was a great patron of the arts and spent millions on paintings, books, music, and all sorts of artwork. He even tried to create his own religion by mixing Hinduism and Islam. While you may think that this was a move inspired by his ego, it was actually a political maneuver, trying to solidify a nation that was violently divided by religion. Unfortunately for the region, he failed, and India would pay dearly for generations to come. Shensong. Being the Chinese emperor during one of the most abundant periods in the country's history surely has its perks. Shensong ruled China between 1067 and 1085 and brought high prosperity along with him. New social policies brought much-needed relief to the poorest farmers, while the country enjoyed peace and economic growth. Shenzong is estimated to have controlled over 30% of the global GDP at that moment. Experts estimate that at the peak of his might, the emperor had the equivalent of $30 trillion to his name. Of course, Shenzong lived lavishly in palaces that to this day are architectural landmarks. Still, most of his spending was on bettering the lives of his subjects, and not many records have been left to tell us more about his personal lifestyle. Genghis Khan. When talking about the wealthiest person in the world of all times, one could easily imagine a well-educated visionary with access to power, an industrious spirit, and a flair for trade and business growth. Well, Genghis Khan was none of the above. Though the Mongol ruler is most well known for his brutal warfare, bringing devastation, mayhem, and massacres all the way to Europe, he did manage to accumulate wealth equal to over $100 trillion. Considering he killed roughly 10% of the world's population, in the span of 20 years, I wouldn't recommend taking business lessons from this ruler. Well, Genghis Khan did invent the first bioweapon, so that's a kind of innovative thinking. Yes, thanks to the tactics Genghis used to conquer half of the known world, 2 centuries later, the bubonic plague will once again decimate the world, this time killing about 25% of the entire world's population. That's how you leave a legacy. Despite his immense riches, Temujin, as was Genghis Khan's birth name, who was born into slavery, actually redistributed his riches among his subjects. Well, he did have several hundred wives, from all of which he had numerous kids. Thank God he had $100 trillion to pay all of his alimony. So it seems that if you want to be among the wealthiest people of all time, all you have to do is rule a country with an iron fist, infuse its economy with your personal finances, and be cruel to your neighbors. Somehow that reminds me of a particular world leader today. What entrepreneurial lessons did you learn from the top 10 wealthiest people in history? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to watch our video on the richest royal families in the world. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.